Hey everybody, welcome back to Byte Club, the monthly indie game club podcast thing. I'm your host, Nevyn.
And I'm your other hose, Jesse.
Fuck.
You wrote hose.
I did. You told me to leave it.
I love it.
This month, we're talking about Lucas Pope's Return of the Obra Dinn. And as a reminder up top, we will be discussing spoilers later on in this podcast. The first half-ish of this is going to be completely spoiler-free, and we're going to let you know when we're actually heading into spoiler territory. So, Jesse, you picked the game this month, so tell us about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like Nevyn said, this month's game is Lucas Pope's Return of the Obra Dinn. It's a game all about discovering what happened to the crew and passengers on an old ship called the Obra Dinn, funny enough. It's mostly, I guess you could describe it as Clue for big boys, where you sort of move around the ship trying to figure out, what happened, try to piece together how each of the crew members perished or didn't. And like we've said, the game is developed by Lucas Pope, best known for his previous game, the pencil-pushing fascist bureaucracy puzzler, Papers, Please.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic game. Fantastic developer.
Absolutely fantastic. I think what's really cool is that he, from what I've seen of Papers, Please, and what I experienced in Obra Dinn, he's really good at utilizing visuals with very little detail, but still filling the rest of the game with all that detail that isn't in the visuals, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, I get what you, yeah, for sure. Like, in Papers, Please, there's a lot of sort of deciphering what's going on visually with characters, very limited space visually, so that you have to infer or sort of apply your own, what's the word? Your own sort of understandings of the world to apply different things to the characters. Like in Papers, Please, you can see a lot of, like, at points you have to determine the gender of characters to figure out if their documents are correct. And you sort of have to infer that, right? Just on how they look. Or you can do a body scan and then you feel like a creepy fascist, but you kind of have to do it to be right.
There's some of that in Obra Dinn as well. I don't think this is spoilery, but like some of the things that you have to figure out, you have to infer people's race based on a picture of them, and sometimes you don't even have their voice.
Definitely, and because of the monochromatic style of the game and just how it looks, very two color, simple polygons, very few textures and things that you can even recognize characters from. And because of that, you can't determine the race of characters just by looking at them half the time. You kind of have to determine facial features to figure out what race they might be, and then hope you can figure out where they're from, which is all super interesting. Yeah, Lucas Pope is great at that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's really cool. So, apart from what we just talked about, you have any hot spoiler-free impressions of this game that you wanted to share?
Totally. So yeah, this game is fantastic. I think Return of the Obra Dinn is just such a good take on the whodunit, like I said, like Clue sort of game, because in the space right now that we have, there's not a ton of detective games, I don't think, at least ones that do a good job of giving the player the opportunity to piece together a story. While I was playing it, I really felt like I was playing a murder mystery version of Tacoma. I don't know if you got that same sort of feeling. I don't know if you played Tacoma.
I played a little, yeah. I can definitely see that.
Yeah, because it's all those. Everything's a vignette. To be clear, if you don't know anything about the game, Obra Dinn is not alive. It's not like Tacoma where there's things moving around and everything. As soon as you find a body and you start discovering what's going on, it's just a silhouette. It's not even a silhouette. It's like a, what do you call it?
It's the model of the character positioned in like the heat of the moment. It's a 3D explorable snapshot of the moments before that person's death, and you have to use those moments to jump from death to death to figure out what happened and who each of the deceased or escaped actually is. And I guess that's another thing to note is that, like, there's magic in this world that it's like set in, I don't know, 18 something, maybe even 17 something, and you're an insurance agent who just has to go investigate this ship that was thought lost at sea. It has returned. And you get there, and there's a mysterious suitcase with a book and a compass, or a pocket watch.
Yeah, pocket watch.
And you have to take those two things onto the ship, and you enter the memories of dead bodies. And throughout that, you fill out an insurance claim. And it's so funny. I love looking at the insurance report at the end after you've solved everything. It's such a great touch. For a few reasons that we'll kind of get into in a bit. But like, there's magic in this world, and there's mystery in pretty much everything, and that all comes through, one, because of this weird pocket watch that you have, and kind of how accepting the player character is, and even the characters on the ship are, of everything that's going on. And that, coupled with the visuals, gives, and the snapshot motif of all these memories, gives everything this really, I don't know, I can't think of the word, but it's a really unique tone and a really interesting approach to storytelling, all because of the visuals mainly.
For sure, yeah. I mean, there's lots of great moments when you first happen upon a body. You take out the pocket watch, you enter the weird death dream memory thing. Sorry, and because of the like tableau style of the game, there's always a great first shot where if you're not moving the mouse or anything, the first picture you get is always either hilarious or terrifying, which is super, super fun. I really like just that aspect of it, finding new bodies and like waiting to see what I was going to end up seeing when
it was so good.
The narrative conversation bits or the sound effects were done. That was always just hilarious. Like the first one with the captain shooting at the guy. That's not a spoiler because it's in the trailer.
It's also in like
it's also the first minute of the game.
I don't count that as a spoiler at all.
No, of course not. He goes to shoot his gun, and like you're standing right in front of him shooting the gun, and it's just such a cool visual.
Right as the sound plays, I love it.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah, just super, super good. Again, to go back to my Tacoma comparison, it reminds me a lot of that, just in the way that you sort of move around the environment and have to piece together a story through environmental exploration. Like, it's not so much as, you found... It's not like Clue where like, you found information that tells you that the candlestick was in this room at this time or whatever. That's not how you play Clue, but you know what I mean? Like, it's not like you find an item and it's like, this will help you later or something like that. You have to, just going around and piecing things together is part of the gameplay, which is really, really cool. Lots of characters require a ton of deduction, so you have to figure out what's going on. A lot of deduction. And that sort of relies on your ability to explore properly and get through the ship and find everything in every one of the memories that you go through, which for me is super cool. It takes a long time to get it all correct, especially if you're trying to do it yourself and not use a guide. Which I had to at points, if I'm being honest.
Okay, cool. I'm not the only one. Good. I was going to feel really shitty if it was just me.
I got stuck a lot.
I got very stuck in this game.
Genuinely, when you get stuck, it is not fun. And I want to get into that later because I don't want to spoil too much because there's lots of things. But yeah, for the most part, it's a really, really good exploration detective game. You learn a lot just by moving around the memories, by going between memories. It's really great. There's lots of good systems. Lucas Pope is really good at designing UIs that feel
diegetic.
Yeah, exactly. Feel diegetic. They feel real. They feel like actual things that you could interface with in the real world. And they also feel like they make sense, It takes a little bit to get used to, but as soon as you get used to it, it feels like second nature, which is great.
There's a lot of really good like keyboard shortcuts and mouse and keyboard tricks that he does when you're going through the book. There's a lot of really, really good, like you can flip to this page, you can go back to where you were, you can go to the table of contents by pressing Q on the keyboard. It's really fluid once you, and it also, the book kind of feels like a toy in that like you can just try to do things with it and see if it works. And sometimes it does.
Totally, yeah.
What left the biggest impression on me, I think, from this game, outside of spoilers, is the sound work. Everything everything in the game, because the visuals are still in very low detail, a lot of the story that you get, or a lot of the scenes that you explore, start with just an audio clip with like subtitles on the screen. Some of them don't even have any dialogue. Like there's a really good one that has no dialogue but tells you everything you need to know.
Oh, yeah, I know what one you're talking about too. Exactly the one you're talking about.
As soon as we get into spoilers, I want to talk about that one because it's amazing. But outside of the dialogue, all of the UI, like the page turning, just all the sounds are good. They're good sounds, and a lot of the visuals that happen in the UI, or when you're being told, oh, you solved these mysteries, it's all timed to sound. Like as text appears or something changes, a note plays, and even at the very end of the game, there's a thing that happens that's timed to sound, and it's so satisfying. I love how timed everything is to sound. That's like one of my favorite things that people can do, and it's done so well here. I absolutely love it. And that's the tear I wanted to go on about that.
No, for sure. Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely, it just sounds fantastic. Yeah. Like you're right. Like I fiddled around with, I don't know if it happened to you. I don't know if you tried it or if you noticed it, but when you're going into a memory, you can click
cancel
again
it.
To get
it's so
out of the
good.
memory. Yeah, so you cancel the animation and everything, which is great. Like I did that 3 or 4 times, just screwing around with it. It just sounds great. The way that the sound comes down, yeah, like it's really, really good.
When you allow the portal animation to like finish, it's like a da-da, and if you cancel it's da-da. It's a good subtle touch.
You can really tell that a lot of the game is inspired by older computers and older computer operating systems, obviously from the color picking stuff. I mean, it's all IBM, Macintosh is the main one.
IBM, Macintosh, LCD.
Yeah, the loads old stuff like that. I hope he had more, honestly, adds more to that. I'd love to see like a Commodore 64 color scheme or something like that.
I think there's a C64.
Is there one? I forget if there is. So. But I mean like old C64, like magenta and pink. Like
yeah,
bright.
There is one.
There is? Okay,
yeah.
I didn't flip through them enough, I guess. I don't know, but yeah, that's really cool. There probably is. I just clicked through a couple. I saw the IBM one that was black, and I was like, that's good. I like that. It's easier on my eyes.
It's funny that you mentioned that because I was looking around at interviews to try and do some research on this before we started today, and he actually says that like he wanted to do this visual style because he remembered doing like point and click adventure games when he was a kid on Macintosh monitors, and he really liked that aesthetic and wanted to see what he could do with that in a 3D environment and see how he could tell stories with that. And it definitely comes through.
For sure, yeah. I mean, it's
very, very good.
It's taking the older DOS, adventure games where you're trying to figure out what happened to people, or even the newer ones that we play now, like Unavowed and all of the what's it called, like the Raven and stuff like that, and all that, and turning that into less of a 2D pixel hunt and more of a deductive, like you actually have to do research,
real deduction and real inference. You have to be in the right headspace for this game is kind of what I realized, because like
definitely
I want to talk more about this when we have access to spoilers, but like I just want to say that I went into this expecting something different, and so I wasn't in the right detective look at everything mindset, and that was a source of a lot of frustration for me. But as soon as I kind of realized just how hard you have to think about some of these things and began to do that, I had a lot more fun with it. And I think that that's something that I just want to get that out there for any of you that are listening that haven't played it yet, and intend to or want to. You have to go into this with the right mindset. You have to be willing to dig for details everywhere that you can in order to really figure everything out. And that's not a bad thing at all. In fact, that's one of the things that makes this game so incredible is how little it holds your hand and how much information is actually there for you if you are just willing to look for it and kind of think outside the box. Like a lot of games nowadays, like if we were to have a AAA mystery game, right, it would make things a little easier for you to find.
I mean, Murdered Soul Suspect. I don't know if you played that.
No, I did not play Murdered Soul Suspect.
Nobody did except for me, honestly. Yeah, it's the same sort of idea. It's what if you gave a lot of money to somebody like Lucas Pope, or somebody not like Lucas Pope rather, but you gave a bunch of money to somebody and you were like, can you make something like this, but we'll give you actual money, and you get a really mediocre game.
They'd give you a whole bunch of audio logs that like spell everything out for you and mention everybody's name, and
I murdered him. I did it. It was me.
Like stuff like that. Yeah.
my name is John the Baptist and I murdered him.
I was here at this time, and you can write that down in your little book, by the way. It's on your map now.
Like stuff like that. Yeah.
There we go.
But in this game, you've got the exact opposite of that. Like, the vast majority of the dialogue, nobody mentions names. Like, there's maybe 10 that do. And you have to... There's so much that you have to do, and it's so incredible because it just drops you when it says, all right, figure it out, fucker. And it's great. It's an amazing game because of that. So go in ready to really scratch your head when you play this.
Definitely. And if you've played Papers, Please, don't come into this thinking it's going to be like murder mystery Papers, Please. A lot of the systems are similar. There's a lot that is shared across both games. Like I said, the diegetic UI and how you kind of have to become used to it, and then your ability to quickly maneuver with that UI becomes part of how good you are at the game, which is really good. But for the most part, you're playing an experience that over time branches in the opposite direction. As you play more of Papers, Please, you sort of start to understand the systems really well, to the point that you can very quickly look over individual pieces of information on the documents. Like, to look for their date of birth and make sure that matches. And that's sort of what the game teaches you over time. So there's varying degrees of challenge. As you go along, you get really good at parsing information really quickly. Here, the more of the game you play, the more information you have to parse, and the less you understand it. And each time you're trying to discover something, I feel like there's never a fate that you can discover in the same way twice. Obviously, there's characters named, but for the most part, if there's a puzzle to it, if there's a greater degree of, there's no puzzles in the traditional sense, but if there's more deduction you have to do, more things you have to piece together on your own without the game giving you the information directly, the harder the game gets and the less you understand about it, which is great.
I think what's really, I think something that both adds to the frustration and adds to the reward is the fact that you have to get 3 fates right before it commits any of them and tells you got them right.
Definitely. That's a great design decision, right? If it was just one fate and you could just try whatever. And admittedly, I did that a lot. I did that a lot where I was like, okay, this guy's Indian. He's got to be one of the 8 Indian guys. And I just clicked through it. I was like, all right. Which is kind of lame, but whatever. Like, it worked eventually if you have 2 other things you're already sure about. So it's not impossible to still do that sort of thing, because they do give you very obvious answers from time to time. But yeah, definitely having 3 fates as the requirement before you know if anything you got was correct is really, really good, because you are just guessing for the whole game. To be clear to anyone that hasn't played it, when you're trying to sort of solve for things, your fates aren't secured until you've guessed 3 of them correctly, and not 3 of them in order. It can be 3 of them from anywhere. So you'll never know if you got the right answer until you have 3 correct answers, and then it only shows you the ones you got right. The rest of them are still up in the air, and that can sometimes really reveal new information. Sometimes you find out a character was killed and you don't know how they died or who they are, but you can kind of guess who they are in some respects, and that helps you figure out a different fate involving the person who maybe committed a murder or who was killed or something like that. So yeah, you have to... The fact that that's the way it is just so smart. If it was more, it would have been not fun at all. Like, that would have been frustrating as hell. If it was less, it would have been too easy. So yeah, I think they made a perfect mark with 3. 4 might have been a little too much even, but yeah.
3. The rule of 3s is true in like everything.
Oh, for sure. Like every game I've played. I played a load of games where rule of 3 is just...
Do you play a lot of games, Jesse?
I've played a couple in my times, probably 10 or 15 if I were to guess. Assassin's Creed Odyssey, right? That's what I've been playing
That's at
recently.
least 4 games, right?
That's minimum. It's trying to be 8, but whatever. I don't want to get too far into that, because this is the Return of the Obra Dinn. I have problems with Assassin's Creed Origins, but in that game, it does the rule of 3 things as well, where every quest is like, here's 3 other quests to finish. So yeah, you see that a lot in games, and here it definitely the gratification of it is really, really cool. And it's interesting that like you can get through the whole plot and unlock, well, plot, whatever, put that in quotation marks. And I don't want to get too far into that because it might be spoilers if we get too far into it, but
yeah, I think we're about ready to go into that. So finish.
Yeah, but just real quick, you can get to the end of the game without getting anything right, and that results in something really interesting that we'll get into in a little bit. That's my one little almost a spoiler that if you're interested, you can be very wrong and then beat the game. But I think unless you have something else you wanted to add, Nevyn, I feel like it's probably time to get into it.
Okay, so as a reminder, we are firmly in spoiler territory. We're going to talk about some spoilers, yo. Fuck.
Oh, okay, all right.
All right. This is also the part of the podcast where we swear as much as we want. It probably isn't that much.
Bitch. All right, moving on.
Damn.
That's all I got.
That was good. I like
Thank
that.
You. Yeah, no. All right.
Okay, so yeah, there's so much to fucking talk. There's so much to talk about.
For sure. Yeah.
That's spoilers. Like, this was a frustrating game.
Yeah, definitely.
I wanna start with this. I wanna get this out of the way.
So yeah, please rant. I really want to hear your rant on how frustrated this game made you.
All right, let me preface this by saying I love this game. It is going on my games of the year list. It is such an incredible, creative, unique game, but it is so demanding. And like I said before, if you don't go into this in the right mindset, like I went into this expecting like a neat little story with some light puzzles, and that is not at all what this game is. Like,
yeah, no.
I was not expecting this mystery to be so in depth and involved, and I got the first mystery done because like it practically holds your hand through that one, right? Because that first mystery with the captain, that's the tutorial. It says this is how this works, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. Perhaps the rest of this game will be about this difficulty, maybe with the couple that are a bit harder. No.
Everything after that,
impossible. It's fucking impossible. And like I played for maybe 2 or 3 hours. The entire time I didn't have a single thing actually committed. I got maybe I got maybe one set actually committed outside of the tutorial. And when I did that, it felt really great. But for the rest of the time, I felt like I was missing something. I felt like there was something obvious that I was missing because none of these things that I was putting in were getting committed. So like I'm either wrong on one thing or a small detail, I don't know. And I had a lot of stuff that was kind of filled out, but none of it was right. It was all missing details. And after about the 3.5 hour mark, I went and I was like, all right, I don't know. I need to look up a guide. I need to get something in here to see how close I am to correct. And I wasn't really looking for a list of this is what happened, this is the answers. I was more looking for something that was like hints, right? I was looking for a hint list so I could kind of try and use that to follow the chain. And I actually ended up finding a really, really good and in-depth collection of guides on gameplay.tips. It's like 3 or 4 different articles and guides by Callie, Marisworks, and Mezzalo on that website. There's a version that does hints, a version that's just the portrait and the answer. There's one that's a whole write-up of the story in proper chronological order. And then there's one that walks you through the game's logic and tells you like how the game wanted you to solve that puzzle within the game. So it says like the person's name, and then this is what you should have done to figure this out. And it's when I read that I realized how crazy this game really was. Like there's one of them where it's the guy who's getting sick, right? It's the memory for the guy who gets sick, and it starts.
Which one? The one that's in the doctor's office, or the one that's in the bed?
The one that's in the doctor's office.
Okay.
He's sick and in the doctor's bed, and you're in his memory, right? So that's where he dies. So you know that this guy died to illness.
Yeah.
The next memory that you go to is of somebody who's already wrapped up and dead. And you go to the memory where he's dying, and that guy is Syed. But in that memory, the guy from the first memory is in his hammock. And in order to get his name, you have to read the number tag on his hammock and then go to the crew roster and find his number.
Yeah.
And I had no idea that that was a chain of logic in this game, and that's just one example. And once I kind of realized that was how in-depth you had to get with this game, then I started to understand and really have fun. And I went back through every single page, every single face that I had that was not blurred, and tried to figure it out using those leaps of logic. And I got a few, and it felt really, really good. But fuck, it was frustrating.
For sure, yeah. Yeah, there's lots of good opportunities, I think, that if you're playing the game for the first time, where if you're in your position, right, where you don't really get it yet, and then you come back and, you spend a little time with it. I think if we had, or if you had more time to play this before, you would have maybe enjoyed it either more or less, because you would have had to spend more time trying to figure it out, or less time.
Probably, yeah. That's
got along with it.
That's a bit on me though.
I mean, whatever. I'm not like giving you crap or anything. I'm just saying, like, in general, the more time you have to play the game, the more you tend to understand that stuff. But I think for players that are coming into it, there's always going to be that puzzle, right? And for you, that was the doctor, or the moment in the doctor's office, rather, where you have to sort of use all of those pieces of information to figure out what's going on, which, again, similar to Papers, Please. I keep going back to that because there's so much about it and this game that are really similar. Obviously, Pope can't really escape that aspect of it. But, in that game, you spend so much time going over so much information. And as you continue to investigate different people as they come up to the station, that you end up, figuring out what's going on, and you become really good at knowing where to look for information and what to check and when to check that. And what information you're given tells you when to check things. So yeah, like once you learn a course of action, you tend to come back and look at things in a different way. Like, okay, you have to figure out, for me, there were two puzzles that had that same effect for me, where you solve them and then you're like, holy crap. Like, I didn't even think about that even a little bit. The first one was the helmsman. Because you can figure out who the helmsman is right away, pretty much, because he's the helmsman. He controls the wheel for the ship. If you look at the picture, like the drawing of everyone on the ship,
yep,
there's only one person holding the wheel.
Exactly.
So that's the obvious answer.
You go, oh, this is the helmsman.
Yeah, obviously. So like that for me, I was like it's so simple, right? But I had never thought of that. And then like I got to that point and I was like, shit, who's the helmsman? And then I looked at the picture and I was like, wait a second. And that really helped out a lot in getting me to think about that other bit of information, like looking at the map, looking at the photos, looking at the crew list, looking at, that's really all the all the major information you end up getting anyways. That's a huge list of anything. But, just looking for little things like that and considering where characters move and how they might be related and those little tiny things people say in their conversations that have that sort of effect. The other thing for me that really clicked and really showed me how deep this game could get was, did you have to figure out the fate of the guy with the woman tattoo on his arm?
Oh shit. I think I used the guide for him.
I'll go over it. It's fine. So yeah, there's that, he's got it's a ship. It's a ship. Yeah, no crap. It's right before they get on the lifeboats to go, and how in the middle of the sea, there's like all those weird mermaid things coming out of the water, and like their souls are getting sucked into the box. I don't really know what happened there. Right before that happens, those people are going onto a ship, Right before that, the guy who was on the ship with like the hat, I don't remember what his name was. He shoots this dude with a woman tattoo on his arm. Anyways, I was just trying to explain the context of that. And when you see that woman tattoo on his arm, that's really all I had for a little while. I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that. Like, he looks like a white dude and has a tattoo on his arm. But I was solving a different puzzle, and I had to come back or whatever, a fate. It's not really a puzzle. I had to come back to the scene where everyone's sleeping, and you were like, same thing with you, where you're doing the tag number, right? One of the bodies laying in the bed has their arm hanging out of the hammock, and you see the woman tattoo on his arm.
Yes.
And the numbers I was like,
yeah,
dude, like, that is such a cool puzzle.
It's such a great puzzle and such a small detail. Another thing along those lines, another one that really got me, like, I was scratching my head on this one for a fucking while. There's in the escape scene when they're trying to escape, right? There's the guy who gets stabbed there, right? But there's the dialogue before that where it's somebody who does the stabbing says, "You killed my brother."
Yeah, that's a really good one. Yeah, go on.
This is so incredible, because you then have to take that and then go to the crew list and be like, okay, which of these two people have the same last name? All right, got it. So these guys are brothers. So this guy's one of these two. And then in a completely disconnected memory later on, there's a scene where that same guy is in his hammock. And it's the scene where Syed's dying, actually.
Yeah.
Like, it's another hammock, and you go and you get that number, and you're like, okay, so there's this one, and then the empty hammock. So the empty hammock has to be the guy who died, which means that this guy right here is the other brother. And, like, I was spending the whole time trying to figure out, like, keeping an eye out for a scene where one of the brothers was actually dying.
Yeah.
Or like being killed by somebody, but it's actually one of the first deaths that happens chronologically. It's the guy who has all the cargo fall on him because the ropes there weren't secured. I was thinking it would be like loose ropes during the Kraken fight or something like that.
That's a fair thought for sure. Like, I think when I first heard it, I was like, oh, there must be like a scene with ropes later on. But yeah, if you go back and you check and this is really cool because you're saying stuff that I hadn't even thought of, like the bad thing. But if you go back to the memory with the stuff falling on the guy, if you look up, you see the person that gets stabbed in that scene that you're talking about, right before the escape.
He's up at the top, right?
Yeah, like, he's up there. If you look up, he's the whatever. He like manages all that stuff. He's the bosun or whatever. I don't know if he's the bosun, but he does all that stuff with yeah, that might be it. But whatever. His role is he manages all of that sort of stuff. So, you know, you don't immediately think about it.
He fucked that up. He killed that man.
Yeah. Yeah, which is great. Like, you hear the rope thing, like you said, and you don't even think about that. But then, you know, you come back to it, you start solving everything on your own, or trying to anyways, and you're like, oh, holy crap, that's really cool. Like, yeah, there's so many great moments like that. Like there's the carpenter. I don't want to just keep rambling on and on about all the cool moments, because there's a ton of them.
Suffice to say, like, 90% of the moments in this game are pretty
rad.
They're
brilliant.
pretty
You feel like a genius. This game makes you feel like a genius. Even if you use a guide, you feel like a genius.
After it makes you feel like an idiot,
yeah,
it makes you feel like a genius.
Absolutely. No question. Yeah, the only other thing I want to mention, I don't know if you have any other little things you probably want to mention. I'm assuming you have a couple. But the only other one I want to mention was I was stuck on the carpenter for a really long time. Like, I was having a super hard time figuring out who the carpenter and the carpenter's mate were. But
oh yeah, they were tough.
Yeah, that was tough. But there's one memory that if you look around at everything, this is what I was saying at the beginning with the exploration being such a big part of the problem solving. If you walk around it a little more, you find a room. And I mean, if you check the map, and this is another thing too with the map, if you check that.
Yeah, you have to use the map.
Yeah, you have to actually use the map. If you use the map, you can see, like, they label regions of the ship. So there's 4 decks, and then they tell you what parts of the decks people are on. So earlier in the game, you find the cow mission, right? Or the cow memory, rather. And you're trying to, you know, figure out who's throwing up or whatever. It doesn't really give you a death, but it gives you information about people, which is really good. Mm-hmm. But they say bring him to the carpenter. So for the whole time, I was like, one of these guys is the carpenter. Because why would they say bring him to the carpenter? I hadn't thought to check the map and see where they were at that point. But later on, there's one where the map sort of helps out. It wasn't actually an individual fate. I was trying to figure out where this one guy was from, and I noticed he was only ever on the top of the ship. So I was like, oh, okay, he's a topman. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. So I went back and I checked the map, and I started doing that for every person, just to see if I could figure out, like, based on where their memories were, what they were about. So again, the whole time was the carpenter, but those 4 guys, I had solved who they were, and none of them were the carpenter. And I was like, wait a second. What? So I checked the map, and I was like, oh, this isn't even the carpenter's room. And then I went back to a mission. Like, I just kept going through stuff, and I was like, wait a second. Went in the room, and you see the carpenter and his mate, like, working on stuff. And I'm like, that is nuts. That is so cool. Like, I spent so much time thinking I was right, and then just because I had never even considered a part of the game that was there, because I was like, whatever, it just tells you where you are. But no, like, those individual rooms really matter, because I was like, the surgeon isn't always going to be in the surgeon's office. But one time he will be, and that will help you solve something. It was great.
There's another example of that when I think Edward Nichols is coming back, all on the little lifeboats and stuff. The first memory with him out, the first memory where you leave the ship.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, hey, we're back. I yield. And he gets shot.
Yeah.
Right. And you have to figure out who does the shooting. Mm-hmm. You have to walk around the fucking boat and figure out where that window is, because that's that guy's room.
Oh yeah, I mean, you have
to piece that together.
You can also just sort of process of elimination that one, because 3 of the Fonsum, I think is what they call them, are on the boats with that guy. There's only 1 left. Well, no, 2 of them are on the boats. One of them dies from the firing squad, and there's only 1 left. So you can do it that way. See, that's even cooler. There's multiple ways you could solve these things just by, like, considering where characters are, what's going on, who's where, when are they doing things. Yeah,
the firing squad one had me stuck for a minute too, because, like,
trying to figure out who shot him, right? Were you guessing it was the firing squad operator, like the gunman?
That was my initial guess. But it obviously wasn't. I knew I had 2 right at that point, so I was like, okay, so it's obviously not this guy. And I went and I checked that guide, and it sort of showed me how I was supposed to solve it, or it gave me the hint, right?
Yeah, and which is track the bullet coming out of the gun and see who actually
track the bullet.
Him.
Yeah, because 1 man shot him. Yeah. Not all 4 of them.
The rest of them missed, which is hilarious. He's not
it's
moving.
Really fucking funny. I guess that's why it's a firing squad. Because, what if they had all missed?
Oh boy, that would have been great.
Like, hey, just hang on for a second. Just hang out for a second. Haha, get it? Because he's hanging. We gotta reload. And 10 minutes later, they try again, and they all miss.
Again, it's like stormtroopers on a boat.
It's bad. I know more about sailing than I ever wanted to know at this point.
Yeah, I know. I know what Persian looks like.
I know what a purser
text,
is.
like when it's written. Yeah, I know what I call them topmen now. Apparently,
if they're climbing around.
Seaman's
on the
a funny word.
Seaman's such a good word. Oh my god! And it does not apply to everyone who mans a ship.
Yeah, weirdly enough, I thought it did.
Only the people who handle the below deck stuff.
I thought
are
you were
seamen.
Man on sea, but turns out that's not what that means.
Not what that means at all. And everybody has a steward. Everybody has a steward.
Everybody. What do? You row the ship. You got a steward. What do? You cook food.
You got a fucking steward, buddy.
You got a steward.
What's that? Oh god, fuck.
Got him.
Podcast is over.
It's all over. We're done. This is what I came here for.
We're done. Put the outro here. Just kidding. Don't. We're still going.
Please.
I wanted to talk about the artist.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. That moment. That was. That's
so
definitely what I'm
like
about.
A prime example of this game's use of sound. You find like some bones in a skull at the front of the ship, underneath one of the decks, and you go into the memory and you just hear this dude grunting and like this plopping and a fart, and I'm like, this dude's taking a shit.
Yep.
And then the grunting turns into choking and splorching and popping, and you're like,
that's a painful shit.
I
wasn't even thinking he was.
It's a horrible shit.
I didn't even think he was dying.
The picture pops up, and the picture pops up, and he's being fucking torn apart by the Kraken, and like that chronologically is the first appearance of the Kraken.
Yeah.
And like it's such a small thing, and it shows like the intelligence of this creature, for one, and two, that's a bad way to go Like, that's bad. That sucks.
Yeah.
That's rough. And it gives that guy's identity to you, because when you go to view the picture, it shows his signature, and you're like, oh, whose initials are ES, or who's an artist on this boat? And there's one.
Yeah.
And I like how there's a few gimmies like that.
Yeah, like Dane with that scene you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, there's only
stabbing.
one,
There's only one
guy
Danish
from...
person.
Yeah, there's only one guy from
Or there's
Denmark.
someone speaking Swedish. You see the little...
Swedish.
And you can... that gives it away. There's only one person from Sweden, which is really good.
It gets a little more difficult when you have to rely on the accents.
Yeah.
Because there's like 3 or 4 people from Russia. There's 2 from Scotland. And they're not brothers. Sound is so important in this game.
Definitely, yeah.
And it just does such a great fucking job with it. I love it.
See, I'm glad you brought up the accent thing and the sound thing, because that actually leads to 2 points I have to make. 2 complaints, actually. As much as I like the game, there's a couple things that I really did not think were good, like even a little bit, that almost frustrated me and made me want to not like the game. So, well, the first one made me not want to like it. The second one was just kind of frustrating as a person of color, but whatever. I'll get to that in a second. So yeah, the first point is more about the fact that you cannot replay sound in the game. That is so absolutely the dumbest thing ever.
You have to go back through the memory.
I get it.
You have to find it and go through it.
I fucking get
right?
it. Yes, I fucking get it. Okay, it's immersion. You only enter the memory once. You can't, replay the memory from the start. Why can I pull up the log, right, but not the sound of it? And you can say, like, it's a book. You can't write sound down in a book. I have a pocket watch that lets me enter the memory of someone's death. Like, why can't I replay the sound? It is so frustrating, because that's such a big part of the game. Hearing lines, figuring out who they're from, the context of it, obviously being able to see it when the people are saying stuff ruins it. That makes it too easy. But just being able to hear it again, oh my god, please. Like, I don't want to have to walk out of the thing and then walk back to it, or like click the thing again. Like, that's just so, and I want to hear it multiple times. I want to hear it a couple times to figure it out. And obviously, again, maybe that's part of it. It makes it too easy if you can hear it multiple times. But I can still hear it multiple times. I just have to waste 10 seconds walking out and walking back into the thing.
That was a big point of frustration for me too, actually. And that was one of the big reasons I just looked for a hint guide, because I was like, I don't want to have to walk around this fucking boat to find the one memory that I want to go to. I don't want to have to go through an entire memory chain to get to the 4th one and maybe get it and then go through it all again. Like, that's incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that where, like, if you... So a lot of the puzzles, not a lot, but like a small handful of the puzzles, I'm just saying a lot because they're the ones that stick out on my mind the most. They were so frustrating because the design was made in such a way to be immersive instead of being, compatible to actually solving the problems. There's a time and place for immersion, in my opinion. You can do things like that. It has a diegetic UI, it has everything going on. There's not a ton of interaction. If you're doing something, the hand moves forward to touch it first, which is great. Like, there's loads of little things like that make it feel like you're controlling a character in a world and less moving a character around in a space, So that's really cool. I appreciate that a lot. It's a fine line. It's blurry, but it's a fine line where you can tell when you've crossed between a player controlling a character and a player just moving a character around in a space. But at the same time, when I'm being frustrated by your choice to limit the systems, like, you've been playing Red Dead Redemption 2, right?
Yeah.
Like, what's going on with that. There's loads of, and it's a bad example to go to Red Dead Redemption 2, one of the most expensive games to make and easily one of the most soul-crushing ones in terms of development. But there's moments in that where it's frustrating even. Like, they have so much money, and it's just so frustrating trying to do something every once in a while. Because, like, picking stuff up in that game takes forever. Like, I don't care that I can see Arthur Morgan's arm moving incredibly slowly as he picks up a jar. That, if you have to pick up a lot of things, oh my god.
If you're going too fast on your horse, you can't eat food.
You can hit a rock and die. Like... It's funny when it happens, right?
It is, but at the same time, it's
game,
like, I have to go through all of that again.
Exactly. If you're frustrated, the last thing you want to be doing is waste more time. And in a game like this, where frustration is the key to enjoying it, right? Like, you have to be frustrated and then not be frustrated.
Frustration comes before you enjoy it.
Rather. Yeah, you get to, I don't know rock bottom.
I don't know if it's like the key, but like there's always a moment where you like something clicks, and before that it's inevitable that you're going to be upset by how this stuff's working.
Exactly. It's totally the key. Like, no question. They only offer you so much information. Like they say, like right away you can figure out who one of the top men is. Like right away they show his face and they're like, level 3 deduction, this is hard to find. So like, unless you're a dweeb, you're not gonna leave it alone. You're gonna spend like 15-20 minutes trying to figure out who it is, obviously.
Guess I'm a dweeb. I waited.
You're a dweeb. Yeah, totally. You should have tried to figure it out. I don't know, my immediate reaction was I saw I could figure something out and I was like, I'm gonna try to figure it out, and I couldn't, and I was just really mad. And like from that point on I was like, every time I see those 3 triangles, I'm not even gonna bother. Like,
gonna wait.
that is really frustrating. Yeah, like there's loads of moments where the game frustrates you, and then when you figure it out you feel really good, but you can't frustrate people on purpose with the design of the game so that when they aren't frustrated it feels really good, or they feel like they've overcome something, or they feel like they've solved something on their own, which is great. You can't do that and also have all these systems in place that make the game more frustrating just because it's wasting your time. Again, the sound thing, I get it. If you play the sound while stuff's on the screen, you can figure it out easier. Like you hear a lantern jingle, you see a guy with a lantern, bing, bang, boom. But you can still play the sound again and just blank the screen out or restart the memory. Like, why can't I do that? Just wasting the 10 seconds it takes to load the thing again and then walk to where I need to go to see the thing, and then click the thing, and then I waste another 4 seconds for the load. It adds up, you know. It gets really frustrating. I didn't enjoy that in the slightest. I wish they did not do that, but it wasn't the worst thing ever. It didn't dissuade me from enjoying the game. It just really, really added to the frustration in a way that didn't feel
good.
Didn't feel good, didn't feel intentional, didn't feel like they were...
It wasn't an example of positive frustration, right? It was just tedium.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. It wasn't reinforcement, it was just frustration for the sake of it.
So what's this other thing? I'm really curious to hear what you had about this relating to accents and stuff. You said there was another point.
Yeah, this is the big thing that disappoints me more than it frustrates me. And I guess from my perspective, I might be looking at it the wrong way, but this is something that happened in Papers, Please, just as much as it's happening here. Your understanding, your stereotypes persuade your understanding of the game. And the way that Obra Dinn's written, when you have to solve puzzles, you have to listen for accents and stuff. And that's fine. I think that's actually okay. That works. My issue is that a lot of the time, the game muddies what it means by nationality and race. Because American's an option on there. Like, what the hell does that mean?
In that time period, right?
Yeah. Well, so the carpenter's a black man. Mm-hmm. And he's listed as American. And I get that. You know, I totally get that. But at other points, you're looking for Indian people. And it is literally always an Indian person. You know, I know in like the 1500s, or sorry, the 15th century rather, this takes place, what, 1492 or something like that?
Something. It's ridiculous. Yeah. It's many eons before I was born.
Yeah, same. Long time ago, back when pirates were a thing, and we still took boats places.
And Krakens were real.
And Krakens were real, so I don't know why I care that much, but just thinking about that aspect of it and how you kind of have to play a racist person to solve some of these puzzles. Not racist, but you know what I mean.
You have to play as somebody. You have to put yourself in the headspace of thinking of stereotypes in order to figure something.
Yeah, you have to lean into this. Exactly, you have to lean into the stereotypes. Racist was a bad word. My bad. I did not mean to say
racist.
That.
Isn't
that
the
is
word.
Not accurate. That is not accurate in the slightest. I said the wrong thing. You have to lean into stereotypes. You have to purposefully lean into stereotypes. And from a development standpoint, when you use race as an aspect of the puzzle solving, what you're saying is, this is how I'm presenting this race to the player. And obviously at the point in time, it's easier to I think represent characters from different locations as stereotypes, because so much of what we view as stereotypes is based on olden looks of characters. I mean, that whole Fonsum group, if that's how you say it, I don't remember their names. Foursome, thank you. That whole group of characters, like the 4 Asians, their facial features help a lot, but like their accents are there. Those aren't, faked or anything. Those sound authentic. I've had friends from Asian countries that sound similar to that in certain ways. They do their own stereotypes of those voices, but yeah, in ways they sound like that, and their family members and stuff. So it's not entirely inaccurate, but from a design standpoint, you do have to create characters that, to some extent, represent a stereotype to the player.
Formosan.
Which doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
I had to look it up. Formosan.
Formosan, okay. Yeah, you have to represent the characters as stereotypes, but also, like, they're defined by their countries. So, like, obviously, you would say an Indian person if you saw someone who looked like some of the characters in the game, but, you know, that's because that's how they're making them. Obviously, multiculturalism at the time wasn't super prevalent.
Yeah.
But again, like, American is a thing, and your option is a black guy and a white guy. So, like, why are we saying there's not, like, an Asian person that lives in India? Like, it's South Asia, you know? There's no reason there couldn't be a Chinese person or from China. Like, there's no reason there couldn't be a Chinese person that lives in India. That was my sort of thing. And that would muddy the puzzle solving, obviously. But you could also just not have the puzzles be based around figuring out the race. Like, that was disappointing to me, the fact that was the case. Because have you played the Red Strings Club that came out earlier this year?
It's on the list. I really, 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 really want to play that one.
It's super, super good. It has a lot of really good elements to it. But there's one puzzle at the end that's really bad for that sort of thing. It's not a bad puzzle. It's actually a really good puzzle. But it's really bad at, like, misrepresenting or stereotyping something so that the player has an easier time solving a puzzle. It uses an aspect of a person's gender. Like, so it's a transgender
I know the one that you're talking about.
Yeah, you've probably heard about it, the dead naming
We
thing.
don't need to go too much more into that.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil anything, obviously, because it's a game that people haven't played.
I know
yet.
the
You've
one
played
that
Obra
you're
Dinn.
talking about, and yes, there was a whole big thing about that when the game was released.
It was a big deal, and rightfully so. It is a big
puzzle.
Deal. It's a good puzzle, bad solution.
I think the term that people use for stuff like that is problematic.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, problematic is a good way of putting it. I just didn't want to use the trigger word.
I got you, man.
Yeah. So did you have any thoughts on that, or do you think I'm coming from the wrong perspective? You feel free to tell me I'm wrong.
Actually. I don't think that you're looking at this through, like, any sort of incorrect light or anything like that. I agree with you fully. I had similar reservations when I was going through it. I was like, okay, so I need to identify this person, and, like, I don't really have any good hints at this point. Looking at them, I don't know, like, it could be this, it could be that. I was trying my best to not stereotype and not base what I thought these people's nationalities were based on their appearance, with the exception of, like, the obvious ones that were, like, there were 4 of them and they were in a picture together, and there are 4 people from this country in a picture together, right?
Yeah.
That's the one example of it that I think isn't terrible. But then there with the Indians, there's like 10 of them on this ship. There are 10 people listed as Indian on this ship. And the only real way to solve that, apart from, or not even the real way, but you know what I mean. You know what I mean. It wants you to lean into that because of how it presents everything.
Exactly.
I distinctly remember a couple of moments where I was thinking along those lines, and it made me feel gross. I did not like that, and I fully agree. I think that I understand why it's used as a narrative device and a puzzle-solving device in this game, but I do think it could have been handled better.
I think you probably could have got away with making this game and just ignoring that entirely.
Oh, yeah, that's... or that, also.
The characters who speak in a different language should be enough to tell you where they're from, right? Or enough to maybe give away something. There could have been more visual aspects to maybe tell you where a character... If you wanted to do that nationality thing, for a game that's a detective game, leaning so heavily on... Not so heavily, but, leaning rather frequently on aspects of characters' race or... And conflating that with nationality.
Yeah.
And appearance is, I think, more acceptable. Like, you could do brothers and sisters and have them look kind of similar, or like with the, what do we say, the Formos or Foursome? Formosan. With those people, you can obviously tell, like, their facial features are very
similar,
very, East North Asian, and you can sort of put that together. I think it's supposed to be, I don't know what the name of the country is, but it's based on a country. That's what they used to call it. Taiwan. So
Formosa
Eastern
is
China, right?
I looked it up. Formosa is the colonial name for Taiwan.
Okay, so yeah, like basically, like, different. It's a different region of China or some crap like that. So yeah, like there's those aspects of it where you can do that sort of thing visually, but for moments where you have to figure out if a character is Indian or not, like there's one that has a turban. There's one that is wearing like a relatively common
relatively
garb in India.
archetypal.
Yeah, stereotypical look of an Indian person that you would perceive at that time. And that's, again, not entirely incorrect to do that, given the time, space, and given the fact that, you know, you're trying to identify people. Like, you wouldn't go out in the street and see a black guy and be like, oh, that's, you know, that's a man wearing a sweater. Like, you wouldn't do that. You're a detective. You're trying to figure something out. So you need visual aspects of things. But conflating nationality with race like that is just, it's muddy. It's something you don't have to do, even in an era where multiculturalism isn't super prevalent. And in a detective game, again, like, you can have visual puzzles that give away characters' nationality without giving away, like, there's loads of puzzles where the characters speak in a different language, and that's all you need. Someone speaking in Persian, you solve the puzzle because they're from Persia. Like, someone's speaking Russian, like, okay, I know the 2 Russian characters. That's literally the same scene. So you can get away with that stuff. For whatever reason, they're just like, Indian.
Like, there's an example of visuals, like the way a character appears being used very well, I think, when you're figuring out the captain, the first mate, the second mate, third mate, fourth mate. Like, you go based off of their appearance in various scenes. You're like, okay, this guy's dressed really nicely, and I know that, you know, you use a lot of deductive reasoning when it comes to the, I guess, upper class or more in charge members of the crew that is based not entirely, but largely on the way that they're dressed. It's not based on race. It's based on how they're dressed for that, right? That's an example of a way that isn't so icky. And like, a lot of people you identify, like, a lot of the people's races in this game is coincidental to what the actual solution is. Like, all the topmen, right? There's the dude that gets torn apart. Like, you don't figure out what his name is because he has all these tribal tattoos.
All those, like, tattoos and, like,
you figure it out because he's like the second to last topman available for you to deduce.
And he's like the only one that's not Asian, and that's it. Not the only one, but there's like there's a small handful of them that aren't Asian, or at least Chinese, and that's exactly, like, that's such a big part of it. I'm fine with race being a part of the puzzle. Again, like, if you, like, the police aren't going to say, we're looking for a man. Can you describe him? He looks like a
guy.
Like, a guy with a face.
He's like 5 foot tall.
But, you know, there's a difference between actual, like, again, you don't have to ignore the character's race, but conflating that with nationality, and then also making that at times such a big part of solving the problems, feels like an issue to me, because the system just tells you when you got it right. You can just, if you know a character's Indian, you can just blast through all the Indian characters and eventually get it if you have 2 other correct answers, which is what I did at one point, and I felt bad doing that. I was like, why isn't there, like, obviously there's a way to figure it out, but the fact that I can brute force it maybe says something about me, obviously. Like, maybe that's me conflating race and just guessing all the Indian guys, and what does that say about my approach to race? But also, like, the game puts that system there for me. It shouldn't be such an easy option, you know? It shouldn't be there as a way to solve the problem in the first place. Like, you can get away with a very similar game without any racial signifiers. I mean, again, Tacoma, like, as much as there are racial signifiers for the characters, and that ends up applying some degree of understanding to them, it doesn't, like, matter to the puzzles or anything, or like figuring out what's going on the ship.
It's coincidental.
Exactly. It's just a part of the character. It's not the game saying, once you've figured out what kind of race this person is, now you'll be able to solve the rest of it. I don't know. They tell you they're Indian, and then you have to figure out their name, and I don't know. I don't know.
I agree.
There's a lot of that just felt dirty to me.
Game's still good, though.
Game good, yeah. Great game good. There's just that aspect of it, and looking back on Papers, Please, which has a similar issue, in my opinion, with the female characters, and like how it sort of makes you body scan them. Like, that's intentional, in my opinion. When they do that, when they're making you, like, when Lucas Pope says, okay, now you have to body scan this character to see if they're actually a woman, that is super interesting. Because from your perspective, like, you're the fascist. You're the one who's like, yes, I want to body scan you because I don't know if you're a man or not, and I can't ask you, so I'll just make sure for sure.
That's the whole point of that game, though. That's like the entire point of that game is it's making you, the player, deal with shitty choices that you have to make because you're a part of this regime.
Yeah.
That's the entire point of that game, is to make you feel like a shitty person or make you fight with the decisions, right?
Exactly, yeah.
That game is about a struggle of morality. This game is not.
It's not, yeah. There's no morality to this. This is a very cut and dry system. It's like...
To the point where you get an insurance report at the end.
Yeah, which maybe... obviously that says something about the cost of human life. Like, you spend all this time... 8+ hours trying to figure out what happened to these people and learning so much about their relationships between each other and who they work with and who they're friends with and
like
stuff.
Caring about them and liking what's happening to them. Like the guy that got torn apart by the Kraken. I fucking love that guy. He's great. He's a boss.
He's like all over the place helping people, like he's shooting stuff. He's great. He's a good guy. Obviously, there's not a lot of narrative significance in the game. There's not a lot of storytelling that it does that's
impactful.
Yeah. That's interesting, in my opinion, honestly.
Yeah. It shows how disconnected. It serves to show how disconnected you as an insurance agent are. And like I mentioned this earlier, and I really wanted to make this point, but the insurance report is so good because you read through it. The guy that got torn apart, they don't know where he's from. They don't know who his family is, but they wrote down, we'll put $45 in a pension.
Yeah.
It's like they give people $45 because their dad died. And like, that's probably a lot of money at the time. But looking at it from today's, like, $45? You kidding me?
Even if you scaled that up, right? Even if that was like $400, $500, $600, even if that was like $1,000, it's still the insurance company saying this person is worth this much money to us.
Which is, there's a lot of really cool implications about that. And it like, you see all of these things that happen. You see giant crabs decapitate people, right? But all you put down in the report was killed by a beast. Like, you don't tell the story to anyone. At no point is the true story told to anyone except you, because you're the one who saw it. Like, the fact that the game ends with you putting a book back on a shelf and drinking some tea is like, this is your job. That's it. That's it. You're so disconnected from these events.
Exactly, yeah. Like, no matter how much you as a player cares about that sort of stuff, the character you're controlling still doesn't. Like, it's their job to not care. Like, if you come at this game like it's a puzzle you have to solve, like it's a Rubik's Cube with a million parts that you have to turn just the right way to figure everything out, that's a really cool feeling, but you end up finishing the game and you become the main character. Like, you have absolved yourself of any concern for the individuals, any concern. Like, you find out that people lived and you're like, oh, okay, cool. Like, that's great. If you care. But, you also hit the end of the game and you don't, you become the insurance broker, exactly like you're saying. Like, you are the person investigating things. It becomes your job. You have to disconnect yourself from everything while also, the game offering elements of it, which is such a good design. Just a great approach.
I love both of the endings to the.
So what's the ending if you don't get everything?
Okay, so there's the ending where you get everything, where like you fill out the book and it's, yay, I know how the ship got back here now, right? Yeah. Then, and quick note, I love the symbolism of the monkey paw. That's super great. And then the ending where you don't get everything, but like you got some of them right, you get a letter that says, hey, thanks, I figured you wouldn't do it. Whatever. And then it goes to credits. You said there was an ending where if you just get everything wrong, or you don't get anything right at all.
Oh, no. I don't know if there's another ending, like a different style of ending. I'm just saying you could finish the game without actually solving anything.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that is pretty good.
There's the few you have to solve at the start, but like you obviously have to get the captain one to move forward and everything because the systems make you as the tutorial. But after that, you can kind of just click through everything and just go from there. So
I'm gonna have to go back and do that. I bet the ending is just like you get a pink slip. It says you're fired. You suck at this.
That would actually be really interesting.
Well, did you have any questions for me? I think I don't really have any further questions.
Yeah, I think we've both kind of gone over everything that there was to say about the game from our own perspectives. I do kind of have a question regarding the characters. So there's those 4 seamen at the top of the ship drawing. So there's 4 seamen that are all sort of just hanging out together. And you kind of have to piece that together. Did you solve that on your own?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so I got 2 of them on my own. It's not supposed to be the hardest part of the game. There's like harder parts. 2 of those I got on my own, and that from that point on, I kind of just used the guide. I think I was like 43, 44 fates deep, and then I had 16 left, or well, 12, 13 left, and then I had to get the other 2 or 3, or however many it is, from the last chapter. But yeah, I had the last 14 just sitting there, and I was like, I can't get this. So I looked it up, and the other 2 guys, and this is what got me thinking about the race thing. Do you think you could have solved that at all? Not like ignoring everything. If you went back to it, do you think you could have figured that out? Do you know what the actual solution for it was?
No.
I was just curious. Like, I guess you didn't finish. I wanted to hear your thoughts on that, but
okay.
But yeah, there was it's not whatever. It's fine. It's not a big deal. It's just the way that I solved it was I had to figure out who the one guy was, and for the longest time I was looking at how he looked, and I was like, yeah, he looks kind of like this guy, and he's like Scottish or something. So I went with Scottish, and I was like, okay, that didn't work. And then eventually I figured out he was Indian, and I was like, that seems odd. The game the whole time was setting it up so that, you know, the Indians look one way, and the Americans can look however they want, but the Indians have to look one way. And then it gives you an Indian character, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's neat. But then I kept playing along, and you know, you figure out eventually that while he's an Indian, it's you know,
it plays back into that other thing that we were talking about, kind of, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's similar in a lot of ways to that. Like, just because of what he's wearing, you have to, and because of who he's hanging out with, you have to assume he's Indian and stuff like that. It's just, yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on there that I wasn't happy with. There might be parts of it to solve it that I didn't notice, but from what I had read regarding that puzzle, it wasn't really about that so much as it was about the player just sort of piecing that together based on who he's hanging out with and what he does. So yeah, just stuff like that. I wanted to hear if you figured that out in a different way, but
nope.
If not, then yeah.
I'm a big old cheaty pants.
Yeah, that's it. That's all I really had.
All right, cool. Well, then we're just gonna do some little transitionary stuff here and,
and
close out.
Going to the future.
Going to the future. All right, so thank you once again for joining us for this month's episode of Byte Club. Next month's game is David Szymanski's DUSK, which is a Quake-style shooter set in some really strange, cult-filled country town with demons and lots of shooting to be done. It's as fast-paced as it is atmospheric and satisfying to play, and I think it has or will have some multiplayer. David's done some other work on smaller, spooky-style experimental indies that you can find on his itch.io page, which I will link down in this episode's description. DUSK's 1.0 full release drops on Steam December 10th, but you can go ahead and get early access to it for like $20, and then you just have it. You've got it when it releases, and you can play through the first 2 episodes right now. I'm really excited to do this because it's a pretty big deviation from the kind of stuff that we've been talking about, which is like slower
no more big story stuff.
Yeah, this is get in, shoot the dudes. And I'm really excited to see what kind of discussion we can get going about that.
For sure, yeah.
As always, we're going to be taking your questions about next month's game and chatting about them here on the podcast, so send them in as you come up with them. We currently have 3 ways for you to send in questions. You can email them to Nevyn, Nevyn, at indie-bytes.com. You can use the contact form at the Indie Bytes website, or you can reply to a post that I'm going to pin to the Indie Bytes Twitter profile. Just remember, if you email questions, don't put any spoilers in the title. I don't know how relevant that's going to be for Dusk, but you know,
can shoot a gun. Oh, thanks.
Guys. God damn it! You spoiled it. Shit, I didn't know.
My bad.
It's okay. But yeah, just be considerate. It's common courtesy. And to wrap some things up, here's some bookkeeping for you. This episode was edited by the fantastic Myles With A, so thank you, Myles, for editing our bullshit.
Woo!
You can find Jesse's content on Twitter and YouTube at Chadunda, that's CHADUNDA. You can find more of my own stuff on Twitter at IndieBytesYT, on YouTube under IndieBytes, and at indie-bytes.com. The music used in this episode is from Return of the Obra Dinn. Whoop-de-doop-de. I haven't actually looked it up yet, but there'll be a link so you can find it. Congratulations.
Very good music.
It is so good. As a reminder, just tweet out about this podcast using the hashtag Byte Club hashtag or hashtag Indie Bytes, because that's nice. Nice to tell people about this shit we do.
Got to keep them posted.
If you want a quick way to tell people about the podcast, then just go to indie-bytes.com/Byte Club, and you can just blast that link out and say, hey, check out this podcast of a couple of dweebs talking about indie games. It's pretty cool. That'd be super great if you did that. You got anything else, Jesse?
I mean, hey, peace and love. Keep it real. Get that bread and play those games.
Yup. Thanks for listening. We'll looking forward to seeing your next question. See you next month.
Yeah. See you December 29th.
Yup. Bye.